Get away from her, you bitch!
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to the blockbuster new release wall in your memory, grab a copy off the shelf, put it in the old VCR, and see what time has done to it. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
Tin Hut.
And we're here to help you navigate all those landmines littered down memory lane. Wow. Okay, Mike, we are in our fourth consecutive week recording.
Goodness.
I don't know. I've caught my second win. I'm ready to keep going.
Oh, yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I just don't think the public is ready for all this, whatever. So, before we get too far ahead, Mike, as I understand it, you have a small little disclaimer or something you'd like to clarify before we get too far ahead. You want to take the deal?
Yeah, I will. It's not as much a correction or a retraction. It's more of a clarification. I imagine there was one person out there who heard my Fifth Element description of the plot of the Fifth Element from the last podcast, and I want to make sure that I impart to that one person a true explanation of what I was saying, because what I did say was so heavy-handed and convoluted. I'm sure it sounded confusing. What I was trying to say, let me say this first. Unlike a newspaper, here on Grumpy Nostalgia, we put our mistakes at the front of our podcast instead of like on page 16. So what I'd like to explain was it was an analogy I made of stylizing. And if it relates to art and architecture, stylizing is like, taking something complicated and making it look simpler to get, just to get the job done. And in my explanation of the plot of the Fifth Element, I was trying to use the analogy of a window, and it really sounded stupid after I said it. I was like, please edit this in post, Justin, but I forgot to tell him that. So my apologies. But anyway, what I was trying to say was the plot of the Fifth Element. No, wait. Let's do this. Let's do it backwards. Picture a rose window in Notre Dame, before it burned. You look at all the detail, Jesus and the disciples, all the intricate colors and lead and steel work in that window. And this would be an apt description of a sci-fi plot for, say, Prometheus or Blade Runner or 2001. Now picture a stained glass window from, say, the 60s or 70s of the last century, where it's just kind of a cinder block Catholic church, and your stained window is a rectangle with colored panes. That is the stylized plot of Fifth Element. So there's your definition. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks you for clarifying that, Mike.
Sure. I knew there was, I could not accept the fact that being in the architecture background that I gave such a, like I said, ham-handed answer to that description. And there was one, I know out there was one person, maybe in Latvia or Serbia or Germany, that heard that was like scratching their head. So I apologize. Like I said, my window analogy was very bad.
Okay, well, again, I appreciate it, as does the podcast listening public. I think it's cute that you went under two assumptions: one, that we have any listeners, and
true,
and two, that the Fifth Element had a plot. But it's still sweet, Mike. It's still very sweet.
Yeah, it reminded me of Doctor Who in reverse. If there are any Whovians out there, they would see cardboard cutouts, paper mache caves. But the story for a Doctor Who episode was like, what? Bonkers, just like over my head, science was just incredible. Right. And then you watch Fifth Element and you got the opposite. You got these lovely, amazing graphics, costumes, settings. But then your story is just kind of, okay, good versus evil.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to pull you out of the Doctor Who vortex because we're going to get a lot of letters. So we're ready to hit it back up again. And, I've been talking to a couple people about the show and what we're doing, and I get some some recommendations like, oh, you guys should do Avatar, or you guys should do something that came out like in the last 5 to 10 years. And first of all, they're kind of missing the point. But then I started thinking about, what do you consider nostalgia, right? So for some people, Hannah Montana is nostalgic. Just depends on what kind of age you are, right? But what we're trying to do here is, again, if you're maybe listening for the first time, if you're still with us, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to looking at the Gen Xers. I don't like to use that term, but that generation, the last generation that got spanked or had lead paint or had steel playgrounds and went to the doctors and they were smoking in the waiting room. I'm not, Mike. I'm not saying we're the last great generation, but we are the last generation that can change a car tire. So,
do you remember the mosquito trucks that would spray like the pesticide from the back of it, and the kids would run after it? And we'd follow behind. Or is that?
I was an addict. I got on my BMX and huffed around 4 or 5 blocks. But my point is that we're kind of focusing on 80s and the 90s, and because I think that's the golden era of movies, the VHS era. So to that point, over the last couple podcasts, Mike, we've talked a couple of topics. One was sequels and one was sci-fi. And we thought, we got our peanut and your peanut butter and your chocolate, and you got your chocolate and our peanut butter. Why not we talk about one that is actually both of those? So we're going to look at the sci-fi classic Aliens from 1986, James Cameron. This was a fun one. There's a lot of backstory around this one. So without further ado, let's kind of jump right in. This movie was released on July 18th, 1986. So it's a bit down memory lane there, Mike. It was directed and written by James Cameron. James Cameron wrote this script while he was directing Terminator. He Moonlight. After he was done with principal photography on Terminator, he wrote this script, and he was a big fan of the original, obviously the 1979 Ridley Scott version. It'd been 7 or 8 years, and no sequel had come of that, and he really had some interesting. He wrote like a 45-page treatment and gave it to 20th Century Fox.
And was it just like a spec script? He wasn't expecting there to be a sequel. He was just kind of doing it to maybe shop it in the future. Okay.
It was a pitch. He said, I've got an idea to kind of take this story, this 20th Century Fox property that was very successful. And 20th Century Fox was in the toilet around this time. They were in real serious financial trouble, so they kind of put it on the back burner. And I think when the success of Terminator came out, they said, "Hey, let's revisit this guy's script." So that's kind of how it got started. Cool. But yeah, this was in the middle of a kind of a slow era in 1986. There wasn't a lot of big blockbuster movies out at the time. I think the only real competition in the theaters at this time was Big Trouble in Little China was a concurrent movie with this one. Not a lot going on there. The cast was really kind of makes this movie, Mike. And we have one returning cast member, from the original movie. So, Mike, I know you probably did a little homework on the cast. Why don't you walk us through who was in this one?
It's not as much homework as it was kind of a crypt notes here. Obviously, you have Sigourney Weaver, who plays Ripley in the iconic role. She was great in The Alien, which kind of got her into this role. But I think I know she worked with James Cameron on Avatar, but I couldn't remember any other movie she worked with. But I was going to say, kind of to your point about James Cameron, was how great his lead women roles are. You had Terminator, he had Sarah Connor as Lynn Hamilton's role. That was, it's a man who can write a lead role. You look at, even Rose from Titanic or Zoe Saldana in Avatar.
Yeah.
And who was the other one? Alita, the movie, the most recent movie he did, the Battle Angel movie, and it's
Battle Angel, yeah.
They're the most believable lead female roles you can imagine, and he seems to be the most apt at it,
Yeah, these genres really kind of cater to the damsel in distress, and he kind of flips that whole thing on his head.
Yeah, they're believable characters. They're not like some of the. I'm hearing okay. This is more like, instead of grumpy nostalgia, this is grumpy modern age. You look at some of the movies now, and the female leads are almost unbelievably good. I don't want to use the term Mary Sue, but that's been tossed around by some aspects of the internet. But
yeah,
he writes it where you feel empathy for the character, and you actually see a journey, that the character makes to. She goes from almost addle-brained psycho to Jane Rambo at the end, and it's a believable journey, and you kind of you empathize and sympathize, and he almost has a master of that particular role, and I just want to make sure we get that out there.
The women are cast. They're not as gimmicks. It pushes the narrative. It's not just a quota box.
It is not a there's not a token female lead. This is a female lead that checks all the boxes for any male lead and does if not the same but better in a role like this. Anyway, enough about Sigourney. This also features a return cast member from one of our podcasts from Twister, Bill Pullman, who you might remember also in Independence Day, and I think he was in While You Were Sleeping.
Like, I think you want to say Bill Paxton. I think you want to be Bill Paxton. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Paxton. Gosh. Yeah, he was... That's right. Sorry, wrong Bill. He was lucky enough to star with both Mad About You stars, Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt. So, what a lucky guy, huh?
Hey, let me stop you there for a minute. I want to go on record and saying that Bill Paxton is the quintessential 90s. I mean, he needs a monument built to him. This guy, go back and look at everything he's been in.
Yeah.
You remember him out of everything he's ever been in. And the fact that he's not on the same level as Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or Bruce Willis.
I am the ultimate badass.
Yeah. This guy... I'm sorry. He needs a monument built. And we're gonna before. Yeah.
He takes. I was gonna say he takes those roles that Tom Cruise wouldn't take. Like imagine his like little wormy character from True Lies. Where he's like the car dealer guy. Just incredible role, but just you remember it. I mean, it's just so like he's the most as great as Sigourney Weaver is in this movie. I remember. Bill Paxton's lines better than anything she said or any scenes that she was in because everybody remembers Game Over.
Game over, man. It's game over.
And this is a bug hunt.
Yeah.
It's he makes this movie because he's
the sadistic older brother, Chet in Weird Science. Every time he's on the screen, he never looked back. So again, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make a special note of our beloved Bill Paxton.
Agreed.
So, keep going, Mike. Sorry.
We have another Cameron veteran, Michael Biehn, who was in Terminator, and he was on another one of our podcasts earlier in The Rock. He was, of course. In most of his movies, he's a military, guy, or he's a grunt, or And in this, he's kind of he's our lead colonial marine on this movie.
Right.
And then we have, Lance Henriksen, where everybody will remember from the movie Pumpkinhead. Who,
of course, first call.
One of my favorite horror movies. He was a co-star with Bill Paxton in Near Dark, so they got that going for him.
Also in The Right Stuff.
Well, yeah. Don't forget Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
That's right.
And then we have Paul Reiser,
another person we met. Well, we didn't meet him, but we saw him with Tony Todd. Remember?
Yeah, they were doing their horror movie panel. He's in. He is, I believe. I just saw a preview for it, but I think he's in that new video game Quarry, and he's one of the one of the characters I think they meet. So it's pretty cool. He's still out there and working.
Hundreds of films resume, just huge.
Yeah. And then you have aforementioned Paul Reiser, who plays in this movie as the kind of the corporate worm, who takes the heel turn somewhere in the middle of the movie, and. I don't know about you, but I couldn't get past the puffy kind of 80s hairdo he had. The little vest, his little vest.
Don't forget the collars on the suit. I love the collar on the suit. That's 80s boy. even 2280.
And then okay. That's what I was going to ask you. What this was 2280. Okay, so this is 60 years after Fifth Element. So that's pretty cool. And then you had your vaguely familiar cast of Marines, that kind of rounded out the colonial Marine cast who were, I think the most impactful one to me was the lady who played Vasquez. I mean, geez, I love that gun she carried the whole movie. It's, yeah.
Oh, she's great. Yeah.
So I don't even remember her from any other role, and I just, but amazing role for this movie.
Vasquez, have you ever been mistaken for a man?
No. Have you?
She's in that staple of actors for Cameron. She was in Near Dark. She was in Near Dark.
Was she? Okay.
And she was had a small role in the Titanic. She's not actually Latino. She's actually, I think she's Irish.
She's Jewish. Okay. I saw her last time, like Goldstein or something like that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, they kind of had tan her up a little bit to it was all kind of makeup to give her that.
Interesting.
Look.
Okay.
Yeah, but she was. How awesome was she? Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? But that is, that's your cast for the most part.
This cast really pulls it off. I mean, you remember every character in here, even the subsequent characters, the ancillary characters. That they really own the screen when they're on there. A couple other notes for you, Mike. This was shot in Pinewood Studios,
of course,
one of your favorite locations.
Every damn movie in the 80s and 90s was in there.
Yeah. And apparently the British guys on the set, the crew, they were completely adamant about not liking or cooperating with James Cameron. They could care less for him. They felt he was, as if it were their right, they felt it was unfair that he was taking the role taking away Ridley Scott's material. And they thought he was too young. And so these union guys made it their business to kind of slow down production with their tea breaks. And there's a real kind of a lot of animosity on the set here for sure, which was weird. One thing I took special giggles about was that the alien nest at the end of the movie, that is the remnants of Axis Chemical from the Batman, the Tim Burton Batman. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So that's weird. Yeah. I was going to ask you a Tim Burton Batman related question. Was the little girl who plays Newt in this movie? Yeah. I have no idea, but I remember this one. Actually, this is Superman 2, I believe, where there's like a kid on the set who says, "Please put my daddy down." Or something. It's like an impressive English accent, like you say.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell this little girl if she was like a Pinewood local, or if I couldn't. Her accent was very off-putting. I couldn't tell if she was American, English, Australian.
She was. They had an interesting workaround. They were required to hire some local talent, and but she was an American. She was an American, living in England, and she got the role. Her only role.
Okay.
What I thought was funny, I read an interview about her, and she's got the line,
"It'll be dark soon, and they mostly come at night. Mostly."
Yes. Mostly.
And apparently her teenage friends thought that was bait to mock her with that line for the rest of her adult life.
No.
To this day, she still gets called out mostly's. I think that was actually brought out in a South Park episode.
Oh my gosh,
kind of used the mostly thing, which is if Matt and Trey get you're in pop culture status for sure.
They mostly come at night. Mostly.
I thought they were like. I thought her classmates would rip her more for saying Ripley. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Newt sucks. Some other research that the alien eggs, a lot of those were saved off the set, and a lot of them are in the Smithsonian in D.C., which we did not get a chance to see last time we were there.
Okay.
No, I think we missed that one, and kind of aggravated about that. This was screened to no test audience. Cameron was not, because of the animosity, he was kind of fighting with Fox, and he refused to have any kind of notes from the studio, or I guess kind of given the situation on set, and he refused to do a test audience. And of course, the studio saw it the first night with everybody else. And it was this huge hit, and it really kind of saved 20th Century Fox from financial ruin in the mid to late 80s. It was a huge. Wow. So that's kind of how it got there. I remember the first time I saw this, Mike. I was I just got my driver's permit. It was one of my first trips in the car by me driving was I saw this at a small little theater in a neighboring town called Wilmington, Illinois, and a little theater called the Marr Theater, a little single house, kind of tucked away in a residential neighborhood. It was kind of a weird zoning thing there, but what was interesting about this theater was it was on Route 66, Mike, famous cool. Route 66, a couple blocks away from the launching pad drive-in, which features this giant, the Gemini giant. It's kind of a large metal astronaut figure built around the time of the Gemini, or as NASA calls it, Gemini program. It's kind of like a roadside attraction. It's really kind of famous. But I took a group of my friends, the guys that I was in band with, Mike.
Oh no,
I was in band. Believe it or not, a Star Wars geek that does a podcast. Believe it or not, he might have been a bit of a nerd in high school.
No way.
But I took myself and the other woodwinds to this theater, and we watched it, and it just blew us all away. And I guess because the intensity and the energy of this movie, I remember a lot of older adults kind of getting up and walking out.
Oh,
They
wow.
just kind of couldn't take the the pace or the themes in the movie. It was really kind of it was really intense. And of course, when you're in high school, that story just blows up. Yeah, people were walking out of the theater, man, and then 2 weeks later, somebody died in the theater. It was just, but I remember seeing that with a group of my friends in high school after I got my driver's license. Just thought this was, I was hooked. I was in. So,
Oh yeah.
you remember the first time you saw this one, Mike?
Yeah, mine experience was a little more subdued. I saw it on HBO, probably like almost a year after it came out. Maybe they always worked with the movies in really long time after they were popular. But I was traumatized, about me and horror movies. My uncle had taken me to see the original Alien when I was like 8 years old, and not knowing anything about, an R-rated horror movie. That movie made some scars. There were some scars there. And
this is it. Yeah.
I think anything related to Alien after that, I was a little timid about going to see. So I kind of just held off and wanted to see it in the bright lights of my own room. So I kind of waited until it came on HBO and saw it. And liked it at the time. So it was, it was
very intense. I remember I had seen the original one probably about a month before in anticipation to see this. I had not seen it. And that one's a straight up horror movie.
Oh yeah,
probably one of the best ones I think ever done. And to come in behind it with this new take on it, I thought was just really kind of clever. So
yeah.
But hey, enough of us yapping. Let's go back and check it out. So we're back in 1986, Mike. As I mentioned, Big Trouble in Little China is blowing up the box office.
Blowing up.
We were a couple months off after the greatest Super Bowl of all time, the '85 Bears.
The Bears! The Bears!
In my part of the country, we were still celebrating that. The Cosby Show was tearing up the airwaves on NBC on Must See Thursday. A little video game called The Legend of Zelda was released. I know that'll hit home on your side of the family a little bit.
Oh yeah.
The gas was 93 cents a gallon. Oprah was soon to start her show in a couple months. We were in the middle of Hands Across America, Mike. Remember that?
Oh no, I forgot about that.
Oh, so lame.
Oh yeah.
And a young Lady Gaga was born. So a lot of stuff was going on in 1986. But the biggest thing for us today, at least, is the release of James Cameron's Alien. So, Mike, if you're ready, hit the button. So the movie opens up to the 20th century fanfare music, which I still think is one of the greatest ways to start a movie. You get that symphonic music, and then you get this really kind of maudlin music. The soundtrack kind of kicks in. The James Horner's soundtrack kind of starts here, and they're showing the vastness of space, and it's got kind of a creepy feel to it already. And we see it's a continuance of where the first movie Alien left off, where Ripley is stuck in the escape ship, so to speak, and she's blasted the alien out of the airlock, and she's safe. So she puts herself in a kind of cryogenic sleep, hoping that she'll get picked up by a salvage team, and then that's kind of where this movie picks off. Salvage team actually finds her and puts her back onto this kind of space station, and she wakes up in the hospital bed, and she's introduced to Paul Reiser, who's a weaselly little company representative, saying that the company that she worked for. They do a little exposition saying that he kind of brings her up to speed that. The big reveal here is that she's been floating out in space for 57 years, Mike. So she's, everybody that she knew or had any acquaintance with is most likely dead. So that not only does that, put her very fragile frame of reference, fragile state of mind in some context, it makes it a little bit worse. Now everything's gone. So
at least he's nice enough to call her kiddo.
Oh, what's with the weird nicknames for this guy?
I don't know.
Matthew McConaughey does that a lot in movies too, but he's got enough charm to kind of pull it off.
Right.
But Paul Reiser, kids, for a younger audience, Paul Reiser is the secondary villain, I guess, in Stranger Things.
Right.
Yeah.
I forgot about it.
Yeah.
That's about it. He's a second-rate Jerry Seinfeld. There you go.
That's correct. Yeah. As we mentioned, Ripley's kind of a broken person. And in addition to that, she's got, the company she worked for, she has to sit in front of this board It kind of explained why she blew up this multi-million-dollar ship. Of course, that doesn't sit well. Her story sounds kind of weird, and they're not buying it. And so they decide not to press charges, but she does get her flight status revoked and has to take this kind of menial job as a dock loader.
Quick little note about, I guess, future inflation. I forgot the number they toss at her, but it's surprisingly only a double-digit million number. And considering she blew up a giant spaceship, Nostromo, along with hundreds of million tons of ore that they had mined, the fact that it only was about, I don't know, say $50 million kind of surprised me a touch. I thought that they would throw out a figure like, hey, this was $50 trillion, But no.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that's not that much for what was destroyed,
Kind of a bargain, really. But hey, but we'll get into that in our economics section, Mike, a little bit later.
Oh, thank you.
So during this, this board review, they're kind of, there's a smirky group of board of directors kind of not believing her story. There's a little bit of animosity there. She says, well, prove me wrong. Let's go back to the planet. He goes, well, we don't have to. There's colonists living there. So apparently in the time Ripley had been out there, the company had sent families of colonists to kind of terraform this planet. So that doesn't sit well with her either. So we kind of cut back to her, kind of brooding in her apartment, and she gets a knock on the door, and it's Paul Reiser and this colonial marine lieutenant. They knock on the door and say, hey, Ripley, not so fast. Maybe your story has some legs because we've lost contact with all the colonists, and we'd like you to kind of help us. And so, she's kind of resentful, obviously. She says, get out, whatever. And then they said, well, we can get your flight status, back, and you can get, out of the docks. And they kind of like shame her into doing it. She's like, no way, I'm not going back. And I wouldn't be any good if I did. And then we kind of cut to her kind of jump scare. She wakes up sweating again. She keeps having these recurring dreams of the chest burster kind of getting out of her. And she says, to get some sort of closure, she says, she calls Burke. Well, I like their little phone cards, Mike. It's all FaceTime.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But she calls them in the middle of the night and says, you're going up. Yeah.
They still smoke cigarettes, but they have these fancy phone
cards. A lot, yeah. and Reebok is still around, which is encouraging.
Yes, you're right.
It's her tennis shoes were Reebok when they show her in the. So anyway, she says, "Well, you're going back there to wipe them out, right? Not study or anything like this." No, he said, "We're going to wipe them out." She says, "Well, I'm in." So the next scene is her kind of meeting the colonial marines, which it's so cliche now, but this was the first time there was any kind of like interplanetary military force on film, and everybody since this movie has copied this concept. It's really kind of lifted from Starship Troopers. I think Cameron made all the guys kind of read. All the actors had to read Starship Troopers so you could understand the kind of the drop zone and the bug hunt, and but it worked. And Starship Troopers is a great movie that we're going to have to get to at some point. There's a lot of parallels there. So she kind of gives the guys a debriefing, and the Marines are just as callous as the people in the boardroom to the story. They don't have time for this hysterical woman. They think she's just a consultant or whatever, but. So she kind of gives the whole rap, and they said, whatever, just show me where there are, we'll kill them. So the next scene is they kind of load up on the ship and kind of go into deep sleep and head out towards the planet. And then they kind of wake up, and then it's kind of the same scenes from Alien. They all get out of the. You're introduced to all the grunts, and we get introduced to Hudson, which is played by the aforementioned Bill Paxton, who's great in this movie. Yeah, I had to get it right.
I got it.
The gruffy sergeant who I love, Al Harris. He is actually a real Marine sergeant. He's the first one of the first African American meritorious sergeants, and a couple Purple Hearts, and just a very well decorated military guy.
He can really chomp a cigar pretty well.
I would never want to smoke a cigar, and I would certainly. Just the thought of chewing on one of those things was revolting, but I think I'm going to steal one of your lines. He chewed that cigar as hard as he chewed the scenery.
Nice.
But I just saw a little interview with this guy, and he is a complete whack job, and he's like a chain smoker. Every interview you see, he's smoking cigarettes, talking about what a badass he is and how important he was. He's just really arrogant, but he's very kind of charming at the same time in real life. But anyway, so they're setting up to deploy on this planet, and they find out that their lieutenant is a noob, as they call him. He's only been on one combat drop, so they've got this lieutenant, and they got a corporate guy, and they got Ripley, so they're not real pleased about this. So they drop down. They're on this main ship, and they take this little recon plane, drives the team down in a little tank, and they kind of land on the facility, and they do their little approach. And you know what I like about Marines? They're so cool. I mean, they make the simple thing is like getting in a car was so cool. You know, I wish I had the energy that they have. Just like, you know, get hot. I love that, you know. But just getting in the car was a really cool thing. But they get into the facility, and they're what I thought was cool here, Mike, is the soundtrack is devoid of any like modern rock and roll. It's all orchestral music, and there's long stretches of just pure silence. Yeah, and I think that's what kind of separates this movie and makes it stand out for me in a slew of comparable movies like this. Is it's an adult. This was made for adults to like. You know, this is an adult, not adult theme, not an adult movie, but this was it was made for an adult audience. That doesn't need, you know. It doesn't need.
Matt. Okay, you were talking about the Marines coming down and coming down to the landing base stuff. Yeah. Can you just picture? I want you to picture this in your mind. An Aerosmith song blaring as they're like rocking down to the base down there in the little copter, you know, and they got this, you know, or you have maybe a Van Halen like guitar solo or something, perhaps.
Yeah, like. You don't need that constant stimulation for the audience. The audience can figure out the relevance and the resonance of each scene on their own if you let them. So the scenes to that point, the scenes where they're kind of approaching, you know, there's aliens in there, but the scenes where they're walking through it, it's dead silent, and
it's disconcerting. Like I wrote down like the lack of soundtrack in spots was almost like unnerving because you knew. You could tell the gravity of the situation just by the was there synthesizer sound there or violin sound or just nothing?
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, like what was that noise? Well, no, that noise was Eddie Van Halen's pick. You know, no, this is real relevant stuff, and that iconic motion sensor.
7, 6.
Can't be. That's inside the room.
It's reading right, man. Look.
Well, you're not reading it right.
5 meters, man. 4.
The high pitched beep that increases with frequency and pitch when something gets close. It's like, you know, I see shows that do that. You know, I call that a filler scene. Or The Walking Dead is infamous for this. The Walking Dead will take 12 minutes of a 44-minute episode by just people, you know, creeping down a hallway thinking, you know, okay, just come out. We know there's something in the hallway. Yeah. But this was like a real relevant scene. Like, you know, you didn't know what was going to be there. And then our first jump scare is kind of Newt, the young girl, the lone survivor of this colony, getting out. So they kind of track her down, and Ripley does a little mother-daughter bonding scene here, which is a kind of a subplot in the film, her, you know, bonding with this younger girl. But they get to the command center. They get the computers up, and they see that Hudson, played by Bill Paxton, he gets on the monitor and sees that all the little data chips that everybody implanted, all the colonies in one spot, thinking that there's some sort of town hall meeting or something. But of course, we know what it really is, Mike. And the line he uses to say that he goes, "Stop your grinning and drop your linen."
Yes,
come on, that to the keen ear. That's a lyric from Brian Johnson, AC/DC, Back in Black, on the "Shake Your Leg" cut. That's a AC/DC lyric, so
nice.
Even better for me. And it's this point where Ripley gets introduced to Bishop, played by Lance Henriksen, and Bishop is a synthetic or cyborg.
No. He's a artificial person.
Artificial person. Sorry, yeah, he prefers the term artificial person. But the significance there is that you know, for people that have not seen the original movie, Alien, Ripley has a sincere problem with these guys because
Bilbo Baggins.
Bilbo Baggins played the synthetic in the first version and went haywire and killed or tried to kill Ripley. So she's not a big fan of those guys, and she was not made aware that he was going to be on there. So she's got an instant resentment for him, of course, even though he's got programming in to kind of. He's a later model that's been fixed and all that stuff, but she doesn't trust him, obviously. So we get to the first kind of big set piece here is that when they kind of explore what's going on in the compound, and as the English say, Mike, they made a meal of it. What's interesting is they're so well trained, but they're just not trained for this particular situation, right? And
they just happen to be near a nuclear reactor too, which kind of
Yeah, they couldn't use bullets too. That didn't help. But Cameron's made a lot of parallels to Vietnam here, and he said that he wanted the U.S. military was so much technically advanced and ahead of the Viet Cong, but the Viet Cong were had their guerrilla warfare, and he wanted to kind of capture that thematic element there. And so, they get into the catacombs there, and of course the catacombs are actually lined with the aliens, and you get that big reveal where the walls come to life and kind of take out the entire team. That's generally pretty horrifying.
Yeah.
Right. So they kind of botch the mission, and the relatively green lieutenant kind of fumbles and gets knocked out. So Ripley kind of takes the leadership role and goes in there with the tank and extracts the remaining Marines out, and they barely make it. So that the rescue mission is over, and as they call to retreat, and as they're doing that, they find out that the ship that could bring them back up to the mothership, aliens got on that as well and kind of crash it, and they see that they narrowly avoid getting that plane getting crashed into them because the alien gets in there and kills the pilot. So
game over, man.
So now they're stuck there. It's game over, right? And that's where Corporal Hudson freaks out. So Bill Pax that foundation was pretty shaky to begin with, but now that this has happened, because these Marines are cocky and they've never been put in a situation like this. They don't know how to handle failure, and he takes it to worse. So Ripley kind of gives him a tongue lashing, and says, "Hey, this little girl lived in this for 6 months." He goes, perfect comeback. He goes, "Why don't you put her in charge?"
I love that one.
Isn't that great? So anyway, they kind of cover the wagons and get back in the facility and kind of fortify the compound and figure out how the heck are we going to get out of here. And then we start to see Bishop and Ripley finagle their relationship a little bit, and then there's a hint of a sort of romantic subplot between Corporal Hicks, played by Michael Biehn, and Ripley.
Just a hint.
Just a hint. But again, very subtle and that's not overdone to take you away from the main plot, which is clever, right? So
yes.
So their idea is that they want to kind of weld all the doors shut and kind of fortify the main base, and then Bishop finds there's a little tunnel. There's an access tunnel that leads to a remote airport dock. He thinks he can crawl down this tunnel. Does it like a Shawshank Redemption, might kind of crawl down this tunnel.
Yes.
Which is as someone who's claustrophobic, that him crawling down that tunnel, it's horrifying. But his plan is to kind of go crawl all the way there. So they said, "Well, we'll buy you some time," and all that kind of thing. So, so before Bishop does that, he does a little homework and he comes to the realization that the corporate goons had a play in this as well, where they were kind of using the colonists there as I guess potential hosts. They wanted to have these guys get infected and bring the colonists back to Earth with the alien technology to weaponize it. So Bishop comes to this realization and exposes Paul Reiser to the group, and that doesn't sit very well, of course. But that's where Ripley and Bishop start to mend their relationship, and there's some trust built there. So Paul Reiser goes crazy, and so during one of those nights, he intentionally kind of sabotaged some of the face hugger aliens, the little babies that grab onto your face and hold on. He kind of compromises that and tries to kill Ripley to no avail. And of course, he gets separated and then he gets killed by the aliens. But as that's happening, the aliens kind of break through and come in to finish the job, so to speak. And so they come in and take out our buddy Corporal Hudson. So no. Bill Paxton bites it again. but he goes out great. He goes out with a great death. And then Hicks is damaged, and Newt gets kind of separated, and Sigourney Weaver is just losing her stuff because she's finally bonded and found some humanity, and then Newt had got taken away. So she gets Corporal Hicks back up to the flight deck with Bishop and says, "Hey, I've got a few minutes left. The ship will be here. It's on a kind of remote control." And she says, "Well, I'm going back in," and of course, because she's going to go try to get.
Oh yeah, this is where she Rambos up.
Oh, what a great scene too, man!
Uh-huh.
So she goes down into the nest, right, and which was and she sees the Queen, which is just amazing practical effect. The xenomorphs, as they refer to them, the aliens, are really kind of a hive. Each hive has a queen. So the Queen is this giant bug, so to speak. She's got a big, abdomen like an ovipositor, and you see her like laying these eggs, and just a phenomenal scene, right? And Ripley kind of torches the place, and it's kind of a cat fights. She's not a big fan of this, but this is the scene where she, she kind of flames everybody up, and then you get that amazing James Horner score that everybody has stolen and copied in movies since. She kind of rushes back to the front, and she gets out of there, and they get to the deck, and the ship's not there, and she starts to lose it because Bishop betrayed her. But of course, he just had to, they do a little misdirect there where it wasn't stable enough, so he ends up coming back, and they fly off just in time to kind of avoid the entire facility getting blown up.
Okay,
and
we're quick stop here.
Yeah,
full stop.
Yeah.
This is, I guess, goes to the alien, and she rescued Newt. And by the way, I would love to have seen the scene. I wish they would include a scene where the alien was carrying Newt back to the nest like a football. When you wanted to see that scene.
Yes.
But as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, hey, maybe Private Hudson, Bill Paxton, maybe he's hanging around there too, right? They wouldn't have killed him. They need all the able-bodied humans they need. Maybe muffiny headed Paul Reiser was still hanging from a pod or something. And
the assumption is they're all being incubated, right? Yeah.
Right. I guess I was confused about what the aliens saw as like a kill, or what they saw as a possible like host. You know what I mean? Like That was the one thing I was a little confused about. Like, how did they know to take the girl and not just kill her right away, but take her back to the nest and put her next to an egg? That kind of thing.
Yeah. That's maybe. That's a good point, Mike. They didn't work out all the alien ecology.
I just wanted to see the scene where the alien's carrying her back. I wanted that.
We'll file a complaint.
Okay.
So they get back, and so they made it, you get your ending number one, where they're on the ship, and they're kind of taking stock of everybody, and they're, it's the assumption is that they're going to go back to Earth, and then she's talking to Bishop, and they have their little closure moment, and then they get that horrible, ominous scene where you see the acid kind of drip down by his shoe, and they look above, and then he gets spiked pretty good, doesn't he, Mike?
Oh yeah, he gets it right in there.
So we come to find out that the Queen has kind of stowed away and grabbed onto the ship and hitched a ride back to the main hangar on the main ship, the mothership, and she's making a mess, and she kind of neatly dissects Lance Henriksen. So he's kind of this milky torso.
She tore him in half. She ripped him in half, King.
So his milky torso lands on the flight deck, and Newt runs for cover. And at this point, Ellen Ripley has had enough. So she runs in, and a little bit of a foreshadowing from earlier. She in her previous job, she used to drive these forklift machines. So she gets into the loader and locks herself in, and it's kind of like a robot type thing, Mike, like a walking forklift. And she
picture it was kind of a foreshadowing through like anachronism was the picturing Avatar. They had the same thing in Avatar. Was the they had the military guys using those like mechanical robots that they were walking
Yeah,
around in.
yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe Cameron lifted that from Aliens. I was thinking.
I think he lifted it from Starship Troopers with the jumpsuits.
No,
yeah.
no,
So
no.
sorry, but yeah. So she's kind of got this exoskeleton like forklift body, and she says that great line, "Get away from her, you bitch," which would sound kind of hokey in another movie, but this was really relevant. She's really angry. So she has this great like wrestling match where she uses this pneumatics robot suit to kind of fight this alien, and she kind of picks it up and does like a WWF body slam and throws it down into the airlock, and she kind of tumbles in behind it, and all the while this amazing James Horner score is playing, and it's just so intense, right? And so she hits the airlock button and opens the gate, and the vacuum kicks in, and the airlock's open, and the alien gets sucked out, and of course Newt, she's just there to be compromised. Ripley. So luckily the Bishop's torso is right there.
The top half, yes.
And top half grabs her, and then the door closes, and then that's it. And it's at that point you take this huge deep breath, like, oh my god, this is 2.5 hours of this pace. You're just kind of exhausted. But the end is they take Hicks and Bishop, Ripley, and Newt kind of get in the cryo sleep chamber to head back. Kind of bookends the movie. And then the movie kind of comes to an end, and like, wow, So, and I don't really know how to articulate, Mike, but when this movie was over, it was like, it was an epic story in the true dictionary sense of an epic. I think epic has been kind of co-opted with local slang to mean something awesome. This epic, it was epic. Well, if you look up the word epic, it means long and lengthy. That's the definition of that word. And I think what's different about this movie, and again, it's hard to quantify, but in 2 hours and 17 minutes, it felt long. It felt like a whole story had been told, and I don't think you get that with, and I'm a Star Wars guy, but the Rise of Skywalker was the same running length, but it didn't feel like you'd seen such, you didn't feel like you were on the same kind of journey. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, there's transformation of characters. There's there's high stakes. There's nuclear explosions.
Yeah,
and after you watch, there's literal relief after you finish watching. You're like, oh my god, thank God that queen bitch is out that airlock. Oh
yeah, I
can breathe. Oh.
But there's real tension all the way through because you're not sure they're going to make it.
Yeah,
and when people die, you feel bad because you get to know them as a character. You know the relevance of them, and there's a resonance to that when they die. It's not,
And unlike Alien Covenant, there's not like one of those sinister endings where, oh wait, you're really not gonna go cryogenic sleeping. I'm gonna kill you and implant all the colonists with aliens, and there's your ending. Sorry, spoiler.
So let's get to that. So so the aftermath here is it made $10 million in its opening weekend, which in today's economy equates to about $26 million. It had an $85 million box office at the end of the day domestically, which equates to about 226, and then worldwide, in today's dollars, was $350 million. So it was a big hit for 20th Century Fox. As I mentioned, it kind of saved their bacon and kind of cemented James Cameron as a real kind of tour de force. He's only like 30 years old when he made this movie. So it won a couple Oscars. It won for visual effects. All practical effects again, and the sound effects, well deserved on both of those. But what I like best about this is it was Sigourney Weaver was nominated for Best Actress for this role. It was the first time ever a female had been nominated in an action role.
Wow!
So a lot of people forget that she she ultimately lost to Marlee Maitland for Children of Lesser God.
Lesser God, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's fair to say that people remember her performance a little more than that one. But sorry, Marley, but you still did a great job. It launched several chronological sequels and kind of tangential sequels, all of which are just really not that good. Alien 3 was really kind of a dark turn. David Fincher directed that, one of our better directors. But it was really kind of a dark turn, and everybody dies, and all the work that they did on Stay Alive is just wiped out with the one little line of dialogue. And it just was kind of a dark, twisted version of the final. I wasn't a big fan of it, Mike, obviously, but it had some neat visuals. Yeah, again, that's kind of the problem. And then had this horrible Alien Resurrection, which I guess is a chronological sequel where, again, we start to dip into the toxic modern tropes of movies where Ripley comes back to life.
Is that where they clone her or something, right? Like so a couple hundred years later.
So the end of Alien 3, Alien 3, Ripley gets she casts herself into a pit of fire as one of the aliens kind of bursts out of her body. She ends it,
Wow.
So she dives in lava. But for some convoluted way, they bring her genetic material back to life in 4, and then Winona Ryder's in there. It's probably one of the worst movies I've seen in a long time. Alien Resurrection. Don't waste your time on it.
So
stop.
I'm confused. So does I guess I got confused. Does grown-up Newt ever appear in a movie, or is her Aliens was her first and last kind of thing? Like she's not like.
Yeah, like I said, the
Okay.
surviving members of this movie, aliens, they all die in Alien 3. They don't survive.
Okay.
They don't survive the cryogenic process.
Oh no! So
Michael Biehn and
it really does continue right after this movie. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, but like I said, if you don't watch it, you don't have to worry about what happens. So just stop at Aliens. You'll be fine. And they made some really crappy tangential sequels, more or less prequels. The Prometheus, where Ridley Scott got back into the original and tried to upstage. I don't know, that movie's pretty horrible. And then the sequel to that was Alien Legacy or Alien
Covenant.
I don't know, what was it called? Covenant. Thank you.
We watched it at the theater. We survived the flute playing scene. So
yeah, exactly. So yeah, again, the fact that we can hardly remember it tells you how successful that hot bag of garbage was. But yeah, this, and then you had all the Alien versus Predator movies, which I don't count because those are video game movies at best. But yeah, just stink burgers, Mike. Yeah, it did cement its way in the ethos of pop culture. I mean, Space Marines are in every video game now, and there's always some sort of military element. And H.R. Geiger's Aliens, the original concept art is still out there, and people still, that's an iconic image. So, it really sets a precedence. It really kind of stands apart for all the trends that it's set. And then, of course, Cameron has just really taken the thematic elements of this movie and applied them to, this huge portfolio of very successful action / science fiction movies with, True Lies and T2 and,
Abyss.
The Abyss before that. And then, culminating with the Avatar. He's literally inventing scientific technology to make movies now, which is, however you feel about Avatar, people say the plot is horrible, but shut up with your plot criticisms. People that go see Armageddon, or don't have the nerve to complain about plot, But
hey,
yeah. So
I got a quick visual. Ben Affleck was animal crackers on Liv Tyler's stomach.
Mike, we talked about this. You're not supposed to talk about that to me. You're not supposed to bring that up.
Oh boy. Sorry.
It's going to take me days and days to come back down from it. So yeah, that's the end, and so let's put it in our grumpy meter, Mike. I don't think there's going to be any surprises here for me, at least. When I saw this in the theater for the first time at 16 years old, and I drove myself to the theater and drove my friends there, and we saw this amazing army guys shooting aliens with machine guns. I mean, come on, who's not going to like that, right? So I don't watch this movie as frequently as I'd like. Prior to that, I failed to mention, in 1987 they released the special edition, Mike, Laserdisc. Of course, I bought it.
Yes.
But it was one of the first instances of a director's cut being re-released, and so in the director's cut of this movie, there's an extra like 40 minutes, and they kind of focus on there's a subplot with Ripley's daughter that probably has more resonance now, but the reason the Newt relationship would be more supported by this. But it turns out that Ripley's daughter was 67 years old when she passed away from cancer. So she gets back to Earth and sees that.
Wow.
Yeah, so Ripley lost her daughter, but she didn't know about it until her daughter was 67 years old. So they had that. And there was a lot more gunplay in this one, and there's a lot more focusing on Newt's family and the colonists and how that whole thing went down. But just kind of fleshes up some of the backstory. But it's not superfluous by any means, but it's just you can the theatrical version you can kind of get by with. But for those that are interested, there is an extended edition out there. So, but yeah, so like I said, I've been hooked. So I watched this movie. I watched the theatrical version again. It was the first time I'd watch it from beginning to end in years. And again, I think I've kind of echoed these points already, but it's just to see something that's so well executed and so well done. I'm going to stay right where I am. I'm going to go up a little bit, maybe to 4.5 out of 5. It's just a really kind of a flawless movie. Just kind of time has been very good to it, and it just kind of reinforces how strong, how well this was put together, that it can stand up to this day. So that's kind of my take on it. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I'm with you too. Kind of like I said last podcast about The Fifth Element, these movies that are set in the future, it's hard to kind of, say, oh, that movie's dated, except for, like I said, the puffy hair and the people still smoking cigarettes and Reebok. Yeah. But it's a classic war movie. And I remember when I first saw it, being pleasantly surprised it was not a true horror movie. Like there's a lot of graphic violence that is omitted from this movie, which I'm glad for. I know that Paul Reiser's character is getting his head chopped off or getting eaten, or the people that are in the rescue plane to pick him up or getting attacked, because you just see blood splatter on the windscreen. So you're like, okay, they died. And it was unnecessary violence that you didn't need to see, and it didn't really help. I mean, you had the horror aspect of, like you said, the wall coming alive, or just seeing people cocooned up on a wall and like these poses. You're like, oh my God, this is frightening enough. And
and those things you don't see, your imagination does the rest. That's how it works.
So like I said, when I first saw it, I would easily a 4-star movie, and I saw really nothing on the rewatch to change that opinion. It is a classic war movie. I mean, you have all the elements of the cigar chomping sergeant. You have the complaining about the bad chow, gung-ho Marines. You have the stereotypical green officer who, like you say, was a noob and didn't know what he was doing,
But then gets his redemption,
Right, yep. And most importantly, at least for, the teenage Mike and the 51-year-old Mike, was no lovey-dovey. I mean, when you watch a war movie like The Longest Day or Midway, you don't have all that romancy kind of kissy, smushy stuff. Yeah. So you don't want that. This is intense war. Even like you said with the scene with Michael Biehn and Sigourney Weaver and him showing her how to use the gun, it's like you could see some romantic tension if you want, but they're not there for that. They're there to learn how to use a freaking grenade launcher. Go away.
Yeah.
And like I said, the best war movies, which I would include this as a war movie, and leave out the mushy stuff. And I really appreciate that. And like I said, on rewatching of it, I see it as what it is. It's an epic. It's, very well done, very well acted. There's no complaints on my end. The CGI is not quite up to 2022 levels, but who cares? When you got a good story, good acting, that's what you came to see.
All right. Well, enough of our social
commentary.
Wants to hear that. Yeah, no one wants to hear that. So, again, thanks everybody for listening. If you'd like to find out more about our wonderful program, you can check us out on Instagram at Grumpy Nostalgia. And if you'd like to send us an email, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com. So, Mike, that's all I'm going to do for today. We're going to wrap it up here. Anything else you want to add before we leave?
Justin, we're on an express elevator to hell going down.
We're on express elevator to hell going down.
All right, well, that's going to do it, guys. We're going to wrap it up. For Mike James, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time.
Nobody touched nothing.